Hi, I'm Kelli Stajduhar. June marks my 30-year anniversary of being a nurse. And for most of that time, I've worked with people who were dying. People either say to me, "You must be awfully special," or "That must be awfully depressing." I've never felt depressed about my work. People who are dying are often at their most vulnerable time in life, their most true selves. The work is immediately intimate and it's soul-filling. When we think about health, aging, and quality of life, we like to imagine ourselves like this woman, Isabel Melco. Isabel lives on her own, she does her own banking and shopping, she cooks, and occasionally she accepts an invitation from a gentleman 20 years her junior to go for an ice cream cone at the local Dairy Queen. She shows no signs of cognitive decline. She has no chronic illnesses. She's not on any medications. And she's only been twice hospitalized, once a couple of years ago when she fell and fractured her pelvis. To the amazement of the hospital staff, she walked out just over a week later. This January, Isabel celebrated her 104th birthday with not one, but 2 birthday parties, hosting 30 people at her favorite Chinese restaurant, the Ho Ho in Kenora, Ontario. Isabel Melco is my grandmother. She's an inspiration, and I surely hope that I will take after her. Unfortunately for some of us, growing old comes with multiple health challenges and experiences that are somewhat troublesome. This slide says staff members of the Parksville Care Home where George Cook lived out his final years of life were in tears after learning that their elderly friend had died on a stretcher in the emergency room. George's daughter found her father alone, shivering and soaked in his own urine. He died 7 hours after arriving, having never been seen by a physician. Most of us hope for a dying experience that is at home, peaceful and surrounded by those that we love. But this is not the way that most of us will die. Most of us will die in hospitals, sometimes tethered to technology, and within a system that sometimes invests in saving lives and not improving end-of-life care. Or if you lose your job and your family and you're poor and perhaps you have some mental health issues, you might end up like Robert at almost 80, spending his dying days aboard a makeshift structure, pushing his cancer-riddled body to row 30 minutes to shore just so he can get pain medication. If that wasn't enough, he had to fend off the raccoons that kept trying to board the structure. It's the first time in my research career that a dying person has asked us to take them shopping to buy a gun so that he could protect himself from the raccoons. We're reading a lot of headlines about physician-assisted death and its deep and polarizing moral questions, but it's not what we should be talking about. In reality, few people will ever choose this way to die. The larger issue is how the vast majority of us will die. We are all going to eventually one day, from heart disease, lung disease, cancers, or dementia, age-related issues. Most Canadians, about 7 in 10, will die in hospitals and care homes without access to the kind of care that would make them much more comfortable. The crucial discussion that we are avoiding is about palliative care. Why is it so far off the public agenda, given that it offers us a much better way to die? Instead of marginal, often painful treatments, panic for ourselves, distress for our loved ones, and wasted costs to the healthcare system, we could face our deaths calmly and with dignity. Research tells us that 9 out of 10 people could benefit from palliative care, but in our desperate bid to avoid death, and guided with the idea that extreme medicalized efforts to keep us alive are deemed heroic, many of us will leave this life suffering, our wishes about our deaths unexplored and unexpressed, while our families look on helplessly. It's not necessary. Palliative care should be as important for dying Canadians as prenatal and obstetric care are for newborns. Palliative care involves skilled communication about what to expect, advanced care planning, as well as attention to pain, symptoms, and the psychological and spiritual issues that face both the dying person and their family. Life-saving measures rarely benefit those with life-limiting conditions. But research has shown us that people receiving palliative care actually live longer with better quality of life than those who get disease-oriented treatment alone. It reduces hospital stays and emergency room visits, allows people to die where they choose, and it improves family satisfaction with care at the end of life. People receiving palliative care are more likely to find their life worth living. And because they are spared severe pain, depression, and family exhaustion, they spend a lot less time in hospitals. Not only does palliative care cut costs, but it also leads to better health outcomes, since hospitals are the most dangerous place for frail older people. If dying people had access to approaches within palliative care earlier in their illness, for example, a year or so before they were expected to die, their eventual deaths would come after a much better quality of life. An American surgeon and writer, Atal Gawande, argues that the sick and aged are being sacrificed as victims of our refusal to accept the inexorability of our life cycle. We are grateful, to be sure, for the advances in medicine that mean longer and healthier lives, but we now need to turn our attention to the collective end game. Many Canadians are already there and thinking about end of life. How comforting it would be to know that when our longer lives are finally over, palliative care is the norm and not the exception that it is today. Many palliative care programs limp along, upwards of half of their costs supplied by donations. Imagine if that were the case for cardiac care. It would be unacceptable to us. But we seem to accept significant disparities across Canada that remain in terms of access to and quality of palliative care. This, while most Canadians say that provincial governments don't give palliative care the high priority it merits. And in 2007, the federal government closed the End-of-Life Care Secretariat and stopped working on a national palliative care strategy. It's time to restart that public discussion for all of our sakes. As a fallback strategy, in the absence of good quality palliative care, medically assisted dying, while an important choice for some people, reflects poorly on our collective grasp of the inevitable and our compassion for ourselves and each other. Thank you.